Good morning again, Rinpoche. We're so happy to be receiving these teachings from you. And good morning, Katrina. Thank you for translating so beautifully for us. We'll begin with some motivation, and the link for the prayers is in the chat box.
To the teacher endowed, transcendent destroyer, one that's gone, for destroyer, completely and fully awakened one, perfect in knowledge and good conduct, one God of bliss, nor the world supreme guide of beings to be tamed. Teacher of gods and humans, to you, the Buddha endowed, transcendent destroyer, glorious conqueror, Shakyamuni, I prostrate, make offerings and go for refuge. When, O supreme among humans, you are born on this earth, you pay 7 strides and said, I am supreme in this world. To you who are wise, then I bow, with pure bodies, form supremely fine, wisdom motion like a golden mountain, fame that blazes in the 3 worlds, winner the best supreme guide, to you I bow, with the supreme sign, space like the spotless moon, color like gold, to you I bow. You are immaculate, the 3 worlds are not incomparable, wise one, to you I bow. Great, compassionate, protector, all-knowing teacher, field of merit and good qualities, vast as an ocean, to the Tathagata I bow. Through purity, freeing from attachment, through virtue, freeing from the lower realms, unique, supreme, ultimate reality, to the Dharma that is peace I bow. Having freed themselves, showing the path to freedom, too well established in the trainings, the holy field, endowed with good qualities, to the Sangha I bow. Do not commit any non-virtuous actions, perform only perfect virtuous actions. Subdue your mind completely, this is the teaching of the Buddha. A star, a mirage, a flame on a lamp, an illusion, a drop of dew, a bubble, a dream, a flash of lightning, a cloud, see conditioned things as such. Through this merit may sentient beings attain the state of all-seeing, subdue the full faults, and be delivered from the ocean of cyclic existence perturbed by the waves of aging, sickness, and death. This ground anointed with perfume, flowers strewn Mount Meru, 4 lands, sun and moon, imagined as a Buddha land and offered to you. May all beings enjoy this pure land. Venerable holy gurus, in the space of your truth body, from billowing clouds of your wisdom and love, let fall the rain of the profound and extensive Dharma, in whatever form is suitable for subduing sentient beings. Yidam Guru Rana Mandalakam Niryatayami. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create, by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create, by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. I take refuge until I am awakened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create, by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings.
Hola, Oya, tiang karsora. Geshe chimbu shiwale songle, chunjule rwa. Tenju deni nyeba shinduka. Tenju deni nyeba shinduka. Tenju deni nyeba shinduka, rwa. Tenju deni nyeba shinduka. Ngarazo tanda top debe. Dewa kya tan jorba chu chame. Ya chu druba la telshi kombe. Milun desi gara. Tenju deni nyeba shinduka. Shiraga nye kawarese. Karesena. Ngazo tanda ngondo topje ki chu shen ba ke kin she do mi ge wa chu pa te kan ya ani chang thong ala so ba lok so pa ya ro shen la chawa pa ya la so ba che an te kan ya nyam so lang bar cha chu sum se ya ka se re ku be chim ba se ro chim ba ta ku be chim ba se ro ani ka ku chi de ba ro ba la de ba so che o tin du chu che 대수 강가대 창고도 대주 밀리 아버지 토발이야. 기왕하면 되게 대수 강가 창아 제정가 주다래. 밀리 아버지 톱되어라. 어디인데 대주되는 예벌 신도 가서도 교주발 신도 가서다. 망쳐와도 미게 와서 최주도 그 녹조대 사네. 내 녀와에다 전도를 소바테서 깨대거라. 자갑갑리 안에 최선배 산제의 전주 선발을 소바테서 진길랍네. 최대 도스도스 퇴시디 박샤샤디디야 박샤세운데니 밀리지 톱겨라 제가 신도 니에까와레스 가르스니 교디신 니니와 교니에까와 가르스니 가스레 된저기 밀리토베 교이 주주도가 아주 시에뭐 대주 강가 둑가와레스 거다 야 되지라나
So here, as the master Shantideva has said, just the first line of this verse, beginning with this life of freedom and opportunity is extremely difficult to find. This human life that we have now, with all of the kind of leisure, all of the opportunities, really the freedom to be able to practice the Dharma, is something that is extremely difficult to find. And when we think about why it is that it is difficult to find, it is something that is difficult to accumulate the causes for. So as we have been discussing, these 16 dharmas that are necessary for higher rebirth, for happier migrations, we need to accumulate all of those causes. We need to engage in the opposites of the 10 non-virtues. We need to abandon alcohol and intoxicants, abandon wrong livelihood and that kind of maliciousness or harm toward others, and then engage in all of those kinds of positives, the sort of actions of being generous with respect, giving to those who are worthy of offerings, and developing love and so forth. And so we have all of those things that are necessary in order to gain this kind of rebirth. This is something that in order to secure the life that we have right now, we have done this in the past. But when we look at our kind of current actions, most of us are doing the opposite of these 16 dharmas that lead to happier migrations. Occasionally, due to the power of the blessings of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, we have a kind of virtuous thought. We engage in positive sorts of actions, but it is extremely difficult to get such a life because it's really difficult to accumulate all of the causes necessary, like these 16 positive dharmas.
Oh yeah. Give you to about you balase. Then you give you to about you. That detail to be enough. Tendula soba is the Madanga Miliki was Susan Samse Tombo. Shirab Nambuara. Oh, Tidanko Kibugi. Tunda Chindi some Chibula soba maiba. Chindi Tratu Nye Chong. Oh, Tindeshe Chibuko Tendula, or still I care about the Pabase. Then it give a chima penjel pembe. Tunda to Buresawara. Give you to get it. Tambo no do choose. No do lada mi ko ban de tando to ban shi kyo ban che kyo ne kyo lada mi che tu be ten kya bar ja to e shi to ane no de chu tu stand ga shi na shi ti lo lo ku ra ro ki bu chung ya ane ki bu chung ding da de le na ane ngelik to be ku de la tong ban ni da chang ju gi sam la so ba te su kom gu ra o ti de 기부 된다 대 기부 중은 된 세부 된다 강가 주바게 좀내 소소 주에 근데 요아래서 기부 된도 더 와줘 발라세 야 되지라나
So this life that is so difficult to find, this can be used. It can, on this basis, we can accomplish the aims of beings. And so here, the kind of life that we have as a human is something that is superior to an animal, for example. We have a higher level of thinking. We have a sharper intellect. And so to just use this kind of life to vanquish our enemies and sort of support our friends, engaging in those kinds of activities, really then we're no better than an animal. There's nothing that makes us superior to that. So we should use this life that we have gained through in the past training in these 16 dharmas in order to make sure that we secure it again, that we have in order a life as a human or a god in order to be able to continue to practice. So the first level is to train in those 16 dharmas for higher rebirth to make sure that we secure such a life. And then we can use this kind of a life in order to create the causes for definite goodness, that kind of definite goodness of liberation by training in its causes, meditating on emptiness and bodhicitta and so forth. We have that kind of potential in this life.
Oh, that getting deal pemba madrub na chindi anda juba kalajus. That under kuga yuba trub nuba susul nuba chaza yuba kam dilia. And it Joachima Lada me Kobana Soba Panja Trumne, and England Lada me Kobana, Juni Taba Tamja Kimba Toba to Majina Sigura. Getting Dilla Pemba Maduna. She should any Pambo Shidade, Mount Balayat in the Taba Tovesi or Madese. At any Maya, Madur to Matu Yomarato, or the Tatarindi Subsocia would say. Nazu Nyawita Tundul Mansha Kenny Tegi or Tatari Legiti, Kuga Sambushivich or the Kugabdi. Ani be thola matanse sabsoche chubu de mato mahobana dinde de yong mardas ta mahobana dinde nation yabu chi chu be ten sambu top gu yena tarin sabsoche ne ngondo lami ko ba to be chu ne chu du le so ba te lo lobro ngeli taba tamje chimba to be chedo kondo nga je la so ba nyamo ta ne ta me ba nga sabsa so so ma do sambi menge samlo te sigra ta me ba samlo ko ne tagbe shenje be samba sanro ta tagbe shenje be chanju semla so ba tizol chane simje tamje ge to tuktunge simje tamje ge ro ane chi tunge tamje se tunge thadu gi tawala ngeli lang go to ba o tinde ne ba yenge ge miji chi ge yin sam kewa na kewa kyude lada me ko ba to ba chene tinde ne ba yenge ge ne sanje ji ko ba de to ba che yin se de che do ne dan dan de Gomuludu Sombe, Umaranji Chunde, Mandulami Koba Tobjeta, Melia Tabata Tamji Timba Tobji, Chundelia Tubache, Sosu Samluta, Shibache, Nete Yana Yandu Kumjishene, Yamsolangi Insam, Te Yamsolambolatene, Simje Tamji turn to Tungege, Kunuse, Yende Kunde, Kansachi Languacha Insambe, Kunuse Tam December Shoes.
So if we fail to use this life for our benefit, for the benefit of beings, then there's no way that we could possibly expect this again. Then that was really, there's no greater loss than this. So if we want to continuously get such a life, to be born as a human or a god, we need to use this now. We need to accumulate the causes that will lead to such a rebirth. If instead we just sort of do whatever, we let it go to waste, then we are going to find ourselves falling into the lower realms and just continuously going down and down and down. To be able to come back up from that is quite difficult to do. And so right now, while we have such a life, it is an incredibly fortunate opportunity. And if we want to gain this again, if we want to secure that in the future, then we need to train at the very least in these 16 dharmas for higher rebirth, as well as the causes for definite goodness, those causes that lead to the state of liberation, or even beyond that, the state of omniscience. And so getting rid of our afflictions, our anger, our pride, in particular, that kind of sense of self, this this thought of I, by meditating on selflessness and even going beyond that, sort of creating more goodness or developing the goodness in our mind further and further, we get to the point of developing the kind of cherishing of others above cherishing of ourselves, and wish for the ability to bring about the benefit of all sentient beings. And so for that purpose, we need to reach that state of Buddhahood, a state in which we have eliminated all faults and developed all good qualities, and therefore have the ability to bring about such benefit for others. And so here, while we have this kind of opportunity, we should take advantage of it. And so we should set our motivation thinking that we are listening to these teachings on the precious Garland by Nagarjuna in order to be able to reach such a state, that we are going to hear these teachings, think about them, contemplate them again and again, and not only that, but try to put them into practice. And so please set a motivation thinking that in order to become a Buddha who knows all of the points to be adopted and abandoned, who has eliminated all faults and developed all good qualities, in order to benefit all sentient beings, I'm listening to these teachings.
뭐야? 뭐 당한테 가서래. 데벨롭돼 봐. 뭐야? 난디 가서라. 뭔데 그 주주도 시에서라. 디시에서도 다 동거고도 와. 네 뭔데 주주 되나려? 신라 차방바다. 펜바주가 니가 디마도 개미도 와. 신라야 되네 동해 중에 주디 방구래서 동해의 전주가 삼바가 신라 차방구래서 대화다 전주가 잠배심게네 신라 펜바주구래서 딩니마도 면도와서라. 대장자에는 이 멤버 소소 르리아 깔레트네. 그러와 그나 좀 현다 로서 텐데 용기 왔다. 내가 세죠 봐서 소소 칼라 마셉시 때네. 세제네 깔레트네. 라다미 저토에 응해솔레 때다. 디바다야다 텐데 삼다요라. 이제 맹아 때 봐서. 야 르리아 깔레트세 소소 대사가 초실을 메르바. 네 니마가 직주. 아니 소고 배 깔레트지 문화 쇼배 소고 깜부깜부샤. 타마타마 텐데 용거도 와. 니멜로소리아 투다 가서 가시. 네 타마텔레 티바 탐지 초치도 되네. 동그sel에 첨발아서 왔는데. 소준 동질마 첨네 소소 소치에도 텐데 용거라. 텐데 네 탑신도 소소 류리아 강에 때야다. 텐데 대신라에 강에 때 요라 신라 차와 휴수세로 지가스레 축이 추진세로 축만부야 세세 뒤체네 따위 추진세로 당님의 로스진데 여기도 조백하실 따위 추진세로 들려 세가 만부잡시니 그 야세니 추바피 진데세 내가 라즈 가르소라 잘로다 냐라서 버티서 가거든 이니 제바보게 미 롱제야려 나가래 디세나 디보요 마레세로 딘데션에 티 세딘데 요르도 대주 강간이 대주 딘데 라다 셴레 차와체바다 딘데레 아니 쳐요 마르베세 소소르리아 티 장장르베세 티티오티기도 와 티 딜레아다 렌잡기도 와야 티질람나 마운타이
So here, as for how where we have arrived in the text, we are around this verse 11, and so here it had described the kind of 16 dharmas that one trains in for higher rebirth, and really those are actions that can be subsumed into these two categories of abandoning harming others, or even the wish to harm them, as well as wanting to benefit others. That really encapsulates those kinds of practices. And so here, doing something like in other systems, for example, there are various austerities or kind of ascetic practices that they assert are going to bring about certain benefits. But here, it's sort of posing the question, by like inflicting such pain on one's body, engaging in such austerities, does that really bring about what you want? Does it bring about, in particular, this kind of abandoning harming others and bringing them benefit. So we see, for example, systems where they advocate extreme fasting, where you cut off food in order to maybe think that it is going to purify negativities, that it will create the kind of conditions that will free you from the lower realms, or be able to give you rebirth as a god, for example, through that. Or sometimes people engage in what are called the 5 fires, where they get themselves really like skinny and dried out, basically being surrounded by various fires, sweating in order to purify themselves. And so some go even to the point of suicide, basically, that they take their bodies to such extremes that they lose their own life, thinking that they are creating some kind of benefit or beneficial sort of causes. And so we see that there are others who make kind of sacrifices, or who engage in various practices like nailing into things. There are those who have this sense that, well, killing animals isn't a sin or isn't a negativity, because these were given to us by a creator god to enjoy. And so the kind of practices like this are not things that bring about either the abandonment of harm or bringing benefit to others. So it's sort of posing the question here, is this something, are these practices that are beneficial, or are they just causing problems?
Oh yeah. Tande shungde dele swanga zo. Osuluka. Ludong jeba bashile sigwa.
Nare.
Lulia tungete ne soza. Tanda menga tembala sobo sosu lulia sawache ne kala masete ala soba. O tende jeba triswa. Ludong jeba bashilas. Lulia tene menga tembala soba. Sosu luda tende lia neba jeba te kyangyange. Ani choyo ma resora choy mense. Ngondo lada mida taba tamje kimba tamje ki choy kewe choyo ma resora telia. Choy mense ra. Choy men dida tene choy mebe kyusen karesine didarse dinde res kyusen shego ra. Deyi nese de rangi lule tsawache shenle tsawache bala soba tezulia choyo ma rete choy senge de gandeji koresine shenle ya ne neba pangbo tanga pen tokpa chikogo resi kora. Semje shenle ya tsawa pangba zewe kune lani tsawa pangba ta pen tokpa chambe kune lani pen tokpa chikogo resi. Di mato choyo ma resi tira. Di tarisi ra. Teye ne shenla neba pong me chen shenle neba ke pang me doa se. Susu lul tungete che mil tungete te mato yo mara. Ane shenla pen tokpa mebe chirisi kora ta tunda. O ta tunda nangpa chene chu se de chanpa ki tsewe kune lana shenla tunge yongme chuwe paya. Chanpe kune lana shenla pepa chuwe tina chu tamze duwe niso ra. Katambe ki shutu sungudwa. Chu tin dor du shenla tinye na duwe do rese. Ta tsangma tere chanju sem kong chanpa nyingchi se tongpa nyi komse de nyumon shiye dan kondo shiye dan tezu kanga shenla tsewe rikde paya dan shenla pepa chuwe shichi she de yo ra. Ati indi nga tsu tangpo ke che she de nga de che chudu dire miki wa chudu pa karwa miki wa chok sumda nyamso langja sumche chudu bude o pe ke che bude nga razo la di mena ni taba tamze jimba she sa yo ma re ki yo na tse di di nyamso lang kiwa che ma lada mi koban tu ti ya ke tang ti che ma lada yaru ni tuwe yo rwa chida ke che she de 먼저 최초로 냠솔아야 되다. 디 매나니 개와치마 라다미 고반 토에요 말에 디 매나니 타바탐제 좀 토에 가야래. 그래서 개와 반제 밀루토브 라야 밀루토브나 대저 최초에 땡 개발시에 토바치기 인삼 거라. 디에딩라니 좀네 타바탐제 좀 심제 탐제서 마음발 최시마 무시 요하여도. 그래서 어디인데 최세의 남바치기나 티니마도 샹달리아 처와치야 다 tindel야 쳐요 말에 쳐도 미팅 받아도라 쳐len 대바셔야 그래서 간주 진도서 아니 몸배왕 쳐len 대바 쳐게 참래 개와시거라 쳐지 참래 개도거라 어더니 녀몸배왕 쳐래 개와 차도왕 콘드왕 쳐래 개와 집왕 쳐래 개와 쳐len 다와시 될래 개와시 되는거라 야 되지라나
So here, where we are picking up in the text is then this verse 11, which reads, Dharma does not come about merely through engaging in physical austerities. Through that type of practice, one neither ceases harming others, nor does one benefit them. So here, these kinds of practices, just tormenting one's body, say through cutting off food or for relying on the five fires and so forth, not only will that not lead to liberation, but it's not even Dharma that can give you the higher rebirth of a human or a god. So here, it isn't Dharma in that way. And it explains this. This is from Gyaltsabje's commentary that really, for something to be Dharma, it needs to involve abandoning harming others and out of love wishing to benefit others, wishing for good for them. And so these kinds of practices, such as these various austerities, don't do anything to stop harming others. I mean, they are harmful to your own body, and they don't do anything to benefit others either. So here, Dharma is something that really involves abandoning any sort of harm toward others and trying to create benefit for them. The Kadampa Geshes, the masters of old, have said in brief, all Dharma is subsumed into that, non-harm and wishing to benefit others. Everything from bodhicitta, that we develop that kind of wish, to the realization of emptiness, to our work pacifying our anger and our jealousy and our hatred and attachment and so forth. These are all activities that are for the sake of reducing harm, of getting rid of harm and trying to benefit others. And so here, if we are to say, oh, well, I'm, pursuing the Dharma that is going to lead me to omniscience or the state of liberation, but we disregard the kind of practices of these 16 Dharmas that lead to higher rebirth, that's really a total misunderstanding. This is the most important kind of practice that we need to do, is to abandon those sorts of harmful activities, like it says the 10 non-virtues as well as those others, and engage in those positive kinds of actions in order to secure a good rebirth as a human or a god, in order to then be able to continually improve ourselves, our mind, and be able to get eventually to that state of omniscience. But if we're to set that aside and say, no, 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 I want the path just straight to omniscience, there's no way that we can do this. There's no way besides continually gaining those kinds of rebirths and continuing to develop the mind. So anything that is creating harm, again, this, as we were talking about last time, is something that transgresses the Dharma. If out of anger or out of attachment or out of jealousy, we act in ways that create harm, then we are going sort of beyond the boundary of Dharma, because Dharma is really encapsulated in these two.
Oh, yeah. 어디인데 다튼다 남과 전에로 소소던달이야 현래 저가 제메서래 이나 다네 최다 준준날 연구도 와 근데 다 소소던달이야 메션다 저가 제메서나 상계의 최라 메라 단계로 최야고 말에 두자르세라네 상계 구수 구도주 강가데 자야 좋아 근데 도시된 다부 최대 자신 뭐 남과 자치수 지거라 대서 봐식 대서 생기 대서야 아니 콘트 제제 파니 처체르그 말버스네 대야르그 말에서도 와 구수다 최대 담주라시 상계 구수다 말도 아프가니스탄 tuzu chonsa tembe kude chimbutu me kyokyam ko pa to chesa pele tinde nyama communism tambule tinde chesa unda kanga pa tor dawa kunde jimbutu zudu pa sakal tapche chilwal tichire ta kyonzu kyamgen de sigura de kadu skep tuda koran kyap tuma do kyonzu kande kyap gede seyara tege kyagwe utenashi tide kol sang kombo insarwa sang Deus sangde sange kunda kanga de chojil lesa chide sacha tongba chiware trapshishe tangchiware tele pongse da tele hapong ti ma jana kiere da Deus ya tanda sang kanga tene te kanga che pese richun ju na shi yare shase da tigal ya pong ti janal ma orchimbere ti chene ta de chene kiran kadin kirka 벽에 개보 송제 ਕੰ부세 시와라
Mm.
베kab리아 자나네 자나 개비 pomo치체 베유네 베베 개비 pomo치체 나말루라 찬세자라 티 베베 티 꾸텔리아 상제 꾸쳔보치 샹요레 티 레사 라무치 줄라 칸세게 쳐 라무치 줄라 칸 디날 땡기 조치야레 디인데 디구데야 코 식체 디 우다 뜨다가데 지가 가가서 냐투도가 매대 가가데 마 오야탄 오르사레 티니 제마 벤제 좀 붙이와라 되게 또저 시지 구양하를 줘네 공부시기에 시간가 또 살아 또 그냥 구양하를 치네 디디자 자디 군데 우디 대요라 디대요라 디 매제 디체지 기사라 디야 제가 당하래 마 자나리아디 오 군데 오셔 강바 전부 나샤세도 지난 전에 그때 체접 다다 키워를 디라래 매드라버래 디야 키우네 니지 마츠가 니가 제 차단세버라 에타 망다스 디 돈에 되게도 왜 아야야 어디세
So here, when it comes to like transgressing the Dharma, we shouldn't do something harmful out of our own kind of afflictions, right? Out of our anger, our pride, our jealousy, and so forth. But then the question arises, well, what about like, say people, if they're not hurting me and I'm not retaliating against them, but rather these are people that are like disparaging the Dharma, or even worse, maybe doing something like destroying images of the Buddha, destroying stupas and so forth. In that situation, is it okay to get angry or sort of retaliate against these people? Well, as Shantideva explains, even in those cases, it's not appropriate to get mad. So here, like we can see, this is something that has happened frequently. Like for example, in Afghanistan, there were many incredible statues of the Buddha that were destroyed, that were sort of bombed or blown up and no longer exist. And then when communism first took over in Tibet and the Chinese arrived, they destroyed all kinds of different statues and stupas and all sorts of holy objects. I mean, they would be like throwing these statues out in the mud and saying to people like, oh, here's your protector. What are they doing to protect you now? And they were doing these awful sorts of things to the various holy images that Tibetans had. And so I will try to get this story exactly right. But so during this time, then metal, I think particularly bronze, would have been quite rare. And so it actually was the case that they would gather the Chinese communist government would gather these statues and melt them down at a place called Drachi, I believe, in order to make them into bullets for their army. So they would be using these statues for such, repurposing them into such things. And so these are just examples of the kind of destruction that was done. So there was one case, though, during one of the first sort of Dharma kings of Tibet, Dzongsen Gampo, he had taken two different queens. So he took a wife from China and one from Nepal. And the one from Nepal, she brought the statue of the Buddha that was known as the great in the Ramoche Suplakang. And so this was something that was like kind of dismantled again to be used for these sorts of repurposing the metal for various things. And so I guess although it had been like taken apart and made quite light, this is the part that I'm going to struggle with a little bit. There was a Panchen Lama who later was able to sort of reunite the various pieces of this statue. The lower part of it was like found later in a house, and they were able to put those two parts of the statue back together.
오야 어디 인도 가서 그래 대줄라 콘도체제고 세와 제초고 말했은 것도 도지된 게 최대한지 몰라서 봐 산제 도르와서 봐 네 최를 매라 당을서 봐 대조 되게 되네 산제라는 내가 말해서 요라 근데 또래 되게 산제를 게네 요 말와 인가란주 다 차단 왕이 되잖아 어 가지고 뒤또네 참 콘도사요라 Te ko pacho semje te ko kondo shawando son, chagdange shawando son, semba namgyu nashi rangshidu menebu nashi chade ora, chulugu chokshen inanda, mishinbe mongbe wando son inanda. O te indi kolo ya nyingshi te ore se. O te ko kusu da tezo yangja shangcho ora te ke marwa. O kasu de. O kusu chuden tamdi chojo. Daga kondo sende lenshi chawa che rongo ma re se ora. Kare se na. Pena nganzo jikdali ya michi semba thanda meba che pe nyoso bozo che ini amji chik chal chibi ni ko amji le kyari jagro amji tsu men ta yabu chi yo adite hako yo mara ko wati de amji le pa tichi ti ne amji te ko le kondo sagu mara sa a ko nying che samje tanda ko sabso che tichi gra tarta gu mara te na shi sanje chum den tege kare sungu resne semje kan le ya tarta ya yo mara nyen tu ta ho re so ra 다그 메시베 몽바데세 탑시쳐오라 출루 초션이나다 콘도이나다 가제나다 어디 그 셈게 콘도 가제를 소바 니모 터즈케레 티타레스 근데 코타마레세 코테 제게 뭐라마베레 소샤요라 간주 남기네 장이 샤위바 낭발야 메시베 몽바데 타치라 니 콘도 가제를 소바 란다 샤니가 네데 타치라 Nyomon beta da meshibe mon beta ni sigura timba to tasha yo mara. Jaza tuba de nyomo de le tashi grima to nyomo chen ke kansa de le ko rame ba ni ji ki ke ni meshibe shawa de son ko de shawa de son ko le chi wa mengere cha do yo ra. O ti ndi ko tuba nyomo tashi ge nyomo tan de kansa me se. Tende sam tang gure song to ya ti chilana.
So even if someone is to destroy various images of the Buddha, destroy stupas, even if like they were to, out of their anger, out of their hatred, like to destroy Bodh Gaya, something that is so precious to Buddhists, it's not a situation where one should get angry at that person who is acting in that way. If we come under the control of our anger, our hatred in response, that's not going to do any benefit, but rather we should recognize that this person who is inflicting that harm is under the control of their own anger, their own pride, their own ignorance, and so forth. I mean, statues, it's not as though that kind of harm to statues or stupas is harmful to the Buddha. It's not as though the Buddha can be hurt. And we can put up statues again, even if they have been destroyed. So here, as the example is often given, if we had someone who maybe they're not mentally well and they are acting a little bit crazy and they go to are taken to a doctor, they might fight with their doctor. They might do and say mean things to that doctor, but the doctor is going to view them with compassion, recognizing that they are under the control of whatever sort of illness, whatever mental illness is going on. And so we need to, as the Buddha always says, not see the other person as the enemy, but really the enemy is their afflictions, the kind of ignorance that is driving them, the hatred that is driving them, the anger that is driving them. So the person isn't the enemy, but really their afflictions are the enemy. And that is really the only enemy that we should recognize. It's not something where we should look at another person and see, oh, they are my enemy, but rather, as the Buddha has explained, there are really only two enemies that we recognize. And one is the kind of nescience or ignorance of not knowing things as they are, and the afflictions that come from that. And those are the only two enemies. The Buddha doesn't see the person in whose mind there are afflictions as the enemy, but really only the afflictions themselves.
Oh yeah. And they tanda de nga zuka sura. Lutong chiban bashi le se sholga chi de. Ane lam koa. Tanda che chudu sheba le soba teta koa tin dokcho le shuba ina. Ane lam koa re shuna. Randa shenyi gal nigu de es titengidwa. Yeah, chindri bashi.
No. So this verse that we have just gone through, verse 11, is really discussing, again, the opposite of those 16 dharmas. So this is paths that are sort of going astray, and how this is only harmful to self and others.
Tā lāṃ kōwā shūngē kē kāngsā dī mūjī chī kī tuwa ndikē. 그것이 남록발에 모두 셰베 추추둘에 도쇼래 슝게 그 간사데 응은징겨라 어디디라 술반디래 진다 수dim 쇠셀와세 담지 람부체라 간세 짐바데로와 짐바가 저 달에 셰사림바 짐바데 숨갈 거고래시어다 어 최지 상생기 짐바 최지 짐바 민직배 짐바 스티날 빼자침부 되고도 대도 삼막게 온도 거라 진당하시 제라 추dim세 네 추dim되어 되리다 능하게 되게 신랑 것을 내가 지야 돼. 다 이게 미게 주장돼서 주로를 되나래 로로 만들어. 이게 능하 이 순간 로와. 다 단단히 가서래 이게 숨디 파샤네 능하 되게 것을 내 듣거라. 이게 삼로되고 소소 삼대마도 퍼즐 내고 말아. 콜 두자 주나 삼 남선 내숨 제나 퍼즐 내고 말아. 지다 미게 와다 레데 공것을 내요 말아. 다단다 류당하니 되게 것을 내 듣거라. 가네케제셰 두제셰다 류동에다 강강 것을 내 듣거라. 자 류하게 되들이야. 방배 추dim들래 추dim시거란 디디. 뭐 딩내고다. 가서래. 진다하세 진버숨디제 추dim제 류하게 거네. 류하게 거네 것을 내가 챙게게 추dim되시거라. 쇠세와 쇠바들에 다 소소응원에 샹라 차와파 샹라 네바 마체베이나야 주 네바 제바 용식이라 주 네바 제바 다란데 메데바 용식이라 티티 쇠바 마곰나 땡이 용야 용마를 숨거라 심바스 심바숨도가 때다 아니 가서래 추좀 샹lunga군에 샹라 차와도 봐야 될 쇠바 마곰나 콘도 사서 콘도세 칸에 두자 랍데나네 땡이 용야 용마르고 세바 공부해서라 생기 추내바 제바다 소소 삼르다 메템바 추나 티투다 소도바 제고레스 티세 마tum는 계란데 용야 요마르 추추두시다 용야 코라 요마르스고라 세바데 빼게 첨부체 셰고라 세바 마고메나 콘도샹와든도나 메게오 강가 용되기로와 어티디자 가르서래 진다 추좀 쇠세데레 세바 티 세바들 숨요레 침바들 숨요레 티니 카가시네 네고라 이 세바들이야 내질에 짐이냐 베세바스 내가 쟁게 간사들아 되기서나시 코콘도 당하게다 차도다 메시베 몸베 샹와든도네 지요레 삼제 콘도 마세비 때 세바 공고 아니지다 코카메삼 코나코나 메시제 티 샹와든도 그래서 학바르도 제가 공부하라 주나 나티엔데고 가서래 세바 내질에 짐이냐 베세바스 동해 당내게서 소소 벤조를 소소 네바로 또 쳔네 동해 조이나 디 당돌라는 쇠도 버셔고래서라 오가 등메스 남산래 잡고되네 아니요 말아 남주네 시티라 추기티레고 말아 추기 삼년 대로거라 몸베 샤와도서 콘도 샤와도서 아니 되제 요요 말아 자고 가르서 뉴질레 치면냐 베서바스 동해 당내게서 봐서 또 주나 어디랭에 서바 공기에서 공셔나 빼편이 전부 용거라 공원에도 마선에 서바 공사 서바 셰셰셰셰다 공원에 라레 따서들래라 제제 마다는 개개 엄마다가 셰셰는 비게 가수라 나저 배잖아 연구도 보람게 빡바데서는 개개 요 말에서 보람게 빡바 불신세 줘라 불신게 빡바들 개요 망아모 요 말와 나저 셰다니에 보람게 빡발이야 티치고 나시래 당아무데 가르스는 거네 라렌타스나니 메슬린 교환도에다 심벌 개발도에다 오고네 대체는 야보 도와서 앞에 유아 친시 삼상 소소소소라 이마체 텐데 교환도에 유셔라 그 제가 칸에세 냐디 짱냥리샤나 되게 펜도 요 말이죠 보람 빡빡들이야 배치셔나 시래 당원에 냠레치는 티나실라네 따르나 아니 보람 나로 그 로드냐 그래 아니 신의 주세로 어디 펜도도와 섬라레 페샹레 페데 하고 소아들레기로 어저 가셔래 보람 신신님 붙지 않네서래 나르지베 로네 나나 요서라 심바스베 미데게 로나로디 놈투 마레세 티나시 셰바다 녀바시에데 빡바디나시래 어디 빡바리 따디나로 쩐다 데리도 와서 님부 보람 거네데 로냐 녀네 냐네 쳔네 로고네데 녀거라 나와르지베 로네 나나 요세 어디시데 가서다 내절에 지만냐 배서봐서 동해 당len지 써봐서 그봐 최라 네버슨 배서봐 당원에 최세대 가야네 근데 콘도 중계지대 지만 리바시는데 대체름 섬에 대전님 부셔지 쉐거라 잠바다니 지다 자주 있습니다 동반이다 써봐다 강가 대티고를 섬을 동서거라 최리야 최리 섬을 떠나왔다 다른 써봐 건너 거야르티 최람 섬을 마다나 최리 대어라니 다 이거 말고 Chile devre, ngangara kondu ina, ngaje ina, chado ina, dressing ina, tagana tangi singaranti mato, chile nga di sigme di samle desi dosha o tindi chigyo mara sungara. Di sons. Chinda chutim seba sete o tirida. Tunge tangle, nechili chimanya be seba, tunge tangle seba, chola ngibar seba. selva se oti seba cha ko da chimba delia longju chimba changja mar da se ro cheji chimba yo re minjik be chimba yo ra kange ye ba samalya kange se de chimba re do ka sanga ju tuje ji chi lab ge ne chimba ro ko ke de shen de chinge wa ra pa lab ge wa ra ko oti de ko te chimba ma bu yo te zo kanga de sigre so ga ra seba chena ha ko ya te le Chimbalia sum yorese, Sebadele sum yorese, or Tiabuja resora. Tamju Lambuche la casa, Tambeche, Lambuche, Lamga Chimbuta, Disumnalia, Taege, Mondechu Chudu Shegora, Tison Dorduni share, did not do there, that and that. Disumnal, Mondechu Chudu do there. Oh, Caresana, Chimbani lesson, Chudum lesson, that's about the Tina Pemambule Yora. Shutubachigora, Oti. 근데 그 최초로 좀 너르더니 시거라 담주 람보실가 담배초지 람가 첨부 되는 데데 어다디 근데 최초로 신는데 계속 강가서 와라 내가서도 마구스 텔레코샤 매버세 텔레테바메 이치메 어디 코토 말에 가르 잡사 가르 잡고를 랜로고를 세라 당아서 지대 텐데르지라 또 최대 건지대기 지당 삼줄에 대버와 지된데 틈바세베네 남주대 샤우라 타드네 경가조 콘조 시시 강가 쳐오라 디딘 지den기 지단 로산게 도다 들어와 티야고 멘도스티 멤버 야고 멤버 파샤 야가 추시 공부도 다던데 쳐지고 와라 딜리 개바지야 만도나니 쳐게요 말에 다가시티 nga 셰셰 때문에 거기와나 주변에 시리 마도 소하게 일레고 말도 어디데 가서 담주 람보체라 가세 다던다 근데 주주라 속에 남가 첨부디 된다 숨나 뒤니 시기라 어디 가 아니 가래 마구 텔레쿠샤 메바 테바 메바 이치 메바라 아니 마구 류동 나르다 류리아 강에 때라 소바 샹라 차와체라 소바 나저 출루되단 개와이네 신다 강가 셰네 드르 셰라 전선 빼틴도와 오늘 전에 최대고 착당 시에다 심지를 짜와 빼야 된다라 다이네고 최고 전에 된데네 라디오도 법식도 베잖아 라디오도 봐 라디 야부지 템버트에더라 그 뒤에시 차서라 진내가 들리체라 그다음 요 착당한테 착당하러 던두다 간가 요라 다 디갈 터바지 다 들리 두가시 최대 착당 시에다 샬라 짜와다 잠주다 집빼 이렇게저라 티셔네 티셔네 들려도라 아 람보체라 강 근데 가세 마구세 ele teba me ici me magu le don le la tongete edero o tinde chene doya de chode ti resya doyina ene de naglamte lamgo ane doya de sera tinga ju rida do lamga tingge dowa tingge de che lamga dosha ne shenda ga te che dosha yora o tinashin rida chi tingge de be lam no ne Singna chuta tutuda chesan chikwa yenge lampe tongba mimi londo be tuja nyanga shimbu shibu jin rokawa tinde senel kon dosha nani shanda zo tina imbere samte ya gore sente dosha yora o tina shinche ne ko pongi yore segora tina singara zo tanda lamgate teta le shembe tsawa chusu mo la soba o tinde ya tiche ati ne karesne dondro sake na nyaga yo sake nasim tupu dondro nashi ngaran zuwa di nasim de koya nasim de nyawa yeda dondro la sobarwa wate zuna la kondro da nga je da trado da ta tagin di shinasi le tukju la soba nyaga yo sa chora di nashi kondro nga je tawan ramandra yo de tukju nashi ka zuli le ndoga shinge tida pechani shekdwa
Oh, yeah.
So, 나름대 글쎄 람베타네 좋아해서 어디부터 지lam이야.
Mm. So then turning to verse 12, so this is identifying a person who is on this mistaken path or goes on this kind of wrong, bad path. And now here, I'm just going to read the full verse, but we're really going to talk about the different parts of it. So one who does not respect the great path of the true Dharma with its manifest generosity, ethical conduct, and fortitude follows the mistaken path of inflicting hardship on the body, just as a cow in a herd follows the line of cattle in front. So here, this is identifying, again, someone who is sort of on this wrong path, but turning to the things that they don't have respect for. This begins with generosity. And so here, generosity includes all three types of those generous actions that we can have. And this is something that is a very vast kind of practice when we think about material generosity, as well as giving advice, giving freedom from fear, all of those different ways that we can be generous. That actually includes many different types of virtuous actions fall into those three types of generosity. And then we have ethical conduct. And now, ethical conduct here in this particular context is described as those actions of body that are negative. So although all our non-virtuous mind states like maliciousness and covetousness and wrong view are non-virtuous, they aren't directly harmful to others. If we have a kind of covetousness or we have maliciousness, that isn't directly harmful in the way that when we enact that with our body or our speech, it is. And so here, this ethical conduct is particularly referring to abandoning those harmful actions of speech and body. And then we have the practice of patience or fortitude. This is something that is really important for us to have, even if we are not going around harming others, even if we are trying to be of benefit to them. Sometimes they will react badly. They will do things that are harmful to us. And if we don't have the kind of ability to be patient, ability to bear with whatever comes back at us, then there's no way that our generosity or our ethical conduct can be successful. So having fortitude or having this kind of patience is something that we have to have in order for our other kinds of practices to be successful. When we come under the control of our anger, if we allow ourselves to do that, we do all kinds of different actions. It's sort of like we're under the control of an intoxicant almost. So when it comes to patience, we need to be able to have this sort of patience or fortitude that doesn't think anything of harm that is done to you. We have a special kind of compassion for the inflictor of harm, recognizing that they are under the control of their own afflictions, that they are really not in control of their faculties. And rather than feeling the need to get revenge, we should feel a special kind of compassion for them. And then there's the kind of patience that is the ability to bear with suffering. When we experience some sort of damage or harm to our wealth, to our health, to when we are experiencing some kind of difficulty, if we in that situation lose our patience, lose our cool, we are likely to do things that, again, transgress the Dharma, that pass beyond the boundary of the Dharma. And so when we start our day, if we are to think like, I am going to be patient, I am going to bear with whatever comes my way, and I'm really going to stick to this plan of following the Dharma, then this is the way that we like put this into practice. We don't just leave this at the level of words. Like we hear these things a lot, and maybe we can say them and explain them, but that's really not adequate. We have to put it into practice. We have to integrate it into our life. It's sort of like the common example of just eating the skin of sugarcane doesn't really give you any of the sweetness. If all of our dharma is just about retaining the words and being able to say it, we don't really get any benefit for ourselves or others if we leave it at the level of just talk. But to really change our life based upon the dharma is like getting the sweetness of that sugar cane. When we actually implement these kinds of teachings and we gain a feeling of the benefit that comes to self and others, we are like getting to that inner meaning. We are having a taste of that sweetness that inspires us to continue to do more. So here to be able to bear with whatever sort of comes our way in order to then not pass beyond the Dharma. And again, here, all of these kinds of practices from these different types of patience to the sort of ethical conduct to the various kinds of generosities. Generosity is extremely vast. It could be materially generous. We could be teaching somebody language or skills, or we could be giving them some sort of protection from fear. We could be giving them love. So all of these kinds of things, really the 16 dharmas that we have talked about above can be condensed into these three that are, again, and in the verse it says like manifest manifest generosity. So there are many different ways that this becomes very clear to us through our practice. So when it comes to these things, we are acting in ways that sort of go against how we normally act, right? In the world, if we have this if we follow the worldly example, there's a kind of a tendency to want to vanquish one's enemies and follow after getting the gain for oneself. And so to act according to the worldly way is really to follow our innate way of being, to not question, not think about our attitudes, think, oh, I'm getting angry, and just to give in to anger, or to really allow our mind to just progress as it normally does. Whereas the Dharma is about reflecting on that, trying to change and adapt what's happening within our mind. So really Dharma, I mean religion, or we could say more broadly, Dharma should be about developing love and compassion for others and really pacifying those negative states of mind, our hatred, our anger, and so forth. And we see that not only is it the case that some don't like make religion into that, or they don't use their religion for those purposes, but rather they actually, in the name of their religion, go out and do things like kill others. And this is something that we would say is like turning a god into a demon, something that is meant to be beneficial, meant to be of benefit to help to self and other, is really being twisted and used in a way that it has become a demon. So to do so, to be one who does not have respect, and here the great path of the true Dharma, we can say, is referring really to those 16 dharmas that lead to higher rebirth, that are condensed, subsumed into these three of generosity, ethical conduct, and fortitude, is like following the for example, following the mistaken path of inflicting hardship on the body, is just like a cow in a herd follows the line of cattle. So as will come a little bit in the next verse, you have certain herd animals where when the leader goes in one direction, all of the rest will follow without ever thinking about where they're going, what they're doing. So even if the one who is in the lead knows that they are leading somewhere like into a really a thicket, a kind of a jungle filled with poisonous snakes and all of these kinds of things, everyone else is just sort of following along, like that doesn't occur to them, or they don't think about it. So one who doesn't, who is on a mistaken path, is sort of like following a cow the way the herd follows the cattle in front of them.
Yeah. 당한 주디 가서라 담아 되게 람 노알 슈베 강사 무서라 이람 노알 슈베 견디 셰도아 코에 드론에 티페지 탄다 따데 신데 신소스타 페지 코에 드론에 메세바스다 드론 고마스르 다게 리단 로사게 룽바 똥바 냥가 요사 람드르 카와디 셰스와 디날 치는 노지 망보용 그랬어. 디날시다 코에 들어서가 저 녀와이다 전줄에서 봐. 제가 깨서는 세요도. 어. 코에 들어온 거 뭐도 가르쳐 그랬어. 녀와라서 봐. 저줄이야. 동네 봐도 매번 용공게. 그봐. 아니 지속을 따와서 봐. 지된 감들으시네 이거도. 지속을 따와서 봐. 공동아 제 차도 안 됐으면 또 망보여라. 그냥 지속 도주당 진짜 지고 연계 장을 당겨라. 당황해 버텨서 막 탭대 간대 그래서라. 아니 아니 람 담바 람 양다베 람데 카리티 셰바다 쟁겐게 신전스를 신나신 상무단지 맹게 됐어도 람 양다바데 상무마다시 아니 그 당시 카리네 타가테테네 신도나시 양다바데 상무단에 니가 맹게 됐어도 람 양다바에 근데 상무단에다 제외 신도의 자게 상무단지 맹게 근데 가대 연계 아니 근데 잘라서 봐 년가 연계 또 주의다 지진 센터만 dragon 직과 연계 지나시 아니 따왕에 받자마자 나 생아 스케치는 지소를 따와서 봐 따왕에 받자마자 연계 주소도 저도 삼마게 동아있기 그래도 방에서 그래 근데 제 고에 들어온 거 봐. 어때달래 안 죽은 죽으래서 남양다 버들 마시우제 친구로도 친배네 견디 요래서라. 디엔데선 소소소소 약부 지는게 간사 이나서 다 레소 되바서 소소 약부 지는게 ndaba yenge kansa inase ne lam lokpa to la machine beche ne lyang da be lam le shu yege tapshi che ko de be che ko de so da ya de.
So then, having identified the kind of person who is on a mistaken path, we then go to the sort of faults of having entered into such a mistaken path. Here, this then describes this in verse 13, where it says, "Such a person with a body entwined by the savage snakes of negative mental states wanders for a very long time in the terrifying wilderness of cyclic existence, whose trees are limitless beings." So here, this kind of person who has entered into a wrong path, the defects of that are wandering for a very long time in this terrifying wilderness of cyclic existence. So here, this wilderness is really describing the kind of taking rebirth, for example, as a hell being, a hungry ghost, and an animal, and so forth. These limitless, kind of infinite, unbearable states. And one is, it's like the body is sort of wrapped around with these savage snakes of these negative mental states, such as the view of the perishable collection and so forth, these thoughts of the various afflictions, as well as that thought of I and so forth. And so here, someone who has entered in to such a path, it's almost like the beings that are there are sort of likened to trees, in that they're not really thinking about this. They're not recognizing the kind of danger or the kind of situation that they are in. Their bodies entwined by these poisonous snakes of the various afflictions, and they wander then for a long time throughout samsara, throughout this sort of wilderness of samsara. Here, then based upon this, when you see that if you are to enter these paths, if you want to have good for yourself, then you need to recognize that entering into these paths, giving rise to this thought of I and anger and hatred and attachment and so forth, are really going to lead to such negative consequences.
Yeah, that is. That is something. 단지 말로서 되시라. 당연히 데이터다 메게와 도저게 제부디 시에도 교통진 제부. 지난 메게와 단다 남주주된 독서 주 연구라. 조선 메게와래 되어 봐. 숨데게와래 되어라. 근데 주주 나네. 조선대 메게 가서 개와래 되어. Tin dokcho de, tin dokcho, miki ware de wara. O ti chen ti, tso kya, ta drebu de shekdwa. So chuba kin drebu kare esara, machimba lembe drebu ti shekwara. O, ti kasara. Ta ti maa di lo shan di uchira. O, ta. Miki we kyutun kin drebu, chita miki we kyutun kin drebu. Taki kiwa chutu chigi dokso ki miki we drebu di kare yungura san. Nami kin drebu di nyawa ida tundu subdi yungura chera. So chuba inadra, machimba lemba inadra, loyma inadra. Ko nyuba chichun yora. Shuk chichu chowa shuk chenpo, mishi shuk chenpo, pina mire seba ina. Ko semba ngenpo shibu che, ane pe sedan dhamma tubu tang seya. Rawa, ane tamadili che su iran che, samlu shuk chenpo tate ya wachon samtinde che na, nyuba che yora. Ta tili ringi zari che, ane tili sedan tinde ma cheba che, yanga raji ta. Shuk chenpo, choro mishi shuk sama shuk chenpo, nyuba chenpo tone cheba tila, nyuba chenpo yora, ti nyawali chigira. Rindige ane, tundru le keba che she do ida de niba de le sha sumba che ni yong do tundru de ka sere nam ju che na nyawa che shuk che de nyawa le ki gra nam mi de bo jinga de ka sere ida le ki gra ne yang de tundru le ki gra o tinde sha chi do yang shung ka she na ya ida de sumba de le yang ke ge de ida de sha do te ka re sne ko ripen sara tundru da mendra ko ida de ripen sara che shira yin rin te gu ye samare jogwa che pe du ti cha ne ni ba de sha che yung gu do ta ka den ke mar o da te zo ge de bu she do mi ge ju de gen de bu de na mi gen de bu che shu de ma ba ne yung ju de ro ti na mi gen de bu she do nya wa ye da tundru som le ke de yin ba sha ra ta te le ju de gen de bu she do gyutun jin trebus. Gyutun siddhu za nga zu minda chi seba ina, minda chi sega ina rwa, so chibar ina. Ne pacho dili so chi ina ko tse tongru dhugu rwa, pacho dili tse tongru chi tonga mambu nyongi rwa. Tetan tunba chi, nami jin trebu mayi ke nga zu mili keba ina ya, ko nyawa na shingi so sogu tebu menge da chi kasi na chocho shi chocho ro chi luli tsawa mambu yungu ko sedan mira shin se ra pacho diga nyoye ki titan trawa chi rangi mili ke na ya na mi jin trebu de nyawa ida yinba che ti bemba mili ke na nga ma tiki ko pa tinte chebe titan tunbe nyawa gyudin su pacho diga nyawa titan trawa soso la chi yung jo ra cheba gyudin su to soso pa ya ti cheba tili ya ka su ra maho bala ya mi sen ta chik pe kuma kongirisa kuma kundu yuwa mili kena rawa wa tinte chili chigira tila cheba kyudun sikidwa soso ku tanda cheba tita tunbe i kumshiri chi chan rukudwa pacho dulu neba chini pacho dulu nyonghe tita chan rawa chi mili kena chi nyongkudwa o tito shegi wara ta mikiwe kyudun jin rebu di karyon kurusini se tonga la soba mili keba ina ya so chebe rebu di nyawa la da keji biche tunga nyangsa ta chima mili ke suna ya mi pacho di nyurimbo tsoya di meba soso che tongdu chagyo sara nyonga gyudun si pacho sesa ka mi digi nyonga nashi soso le tete chanda washi yungor mili ke na ya nyonga gyudun siyate gyudos gyudun jin rebu tse tonga la soban gyuba das nami jin rebu ngendun doa di ke she mo che kiwe le jin rebu di telen doa di chungu desi soju pangpa la soba ten rebu di liya lada milike ya ta ane milike na ya ko liu tewa la soba tinda yungu de she to ya di chi lama
Oh. So then we turn next to looking at the kind of results for those who engage in the opposite of these 16 dharmas that lead to higher rebirths. So again, there are 13 of those that are non-virtuous actions, right? That are things that we are trying to avoid. And then there are 3 that are virtuous. And so the opposite of those, the non-virtues of those, as well as the kind of 13 non-virtues that are listed listed above, what are the sort of results that come from engaging in those? So here, when it comes to the results of various non-virtues, particularly here non-virtues, then there are different kinds of results that we can have. So there is, as usual, there are different ways of translating this, but there is the kind of result that accords with the cause. There is the ripening result. And so usually the ripening result is really the largest kind of result, like taking birth in a particular realm. So the various kinds of actions that we engage in can be relatively light or heavy based upon the sort of the preparation that went into that, the actual carrying out of that action, and then the conclusion. Like, say if you kill someone and you're really preparing for a long time, making all kinds of detailed plots, and then you actually carry out a really brutal killing and then afterwards rejoice in it, that's going to be much heavier than if you didn't have an actual plan and say killed somebody by mistake and so forth. So due to the preparatory time, the actual carrying out of the action, and then the conclusion of that, what happens after, the actions that we do can have varying degrees of gravity. And so when it comes to the ripening result of these negative actions, that's going to be rebirth in the three lower realms. So rebirth as a hell being, as a hungry ghost, or as an animal. Now, in some texts, it will describe that the kind of heaviest non-virtues will result in a rebirth in a hell as a ripening result, and the middling will lead to rebirth as a hungry ghost or a preta, and then the lighter of those would lead to rebirth as an animal. However, in some texts, those two are switched. They say that a kind of middling level of non-virtue will lead to rebirth as an animal, and a lighter one would lead to rebirth as a preta. And this is because of the fact that pretas are said to have a little bit clearer consciousness, more ability to think, and their lifespans are not as long, so one is more quickly able to get out of that. But however it may be, the kind of largest result is really that ripening result. And then we have the result that accords with the cause. So this comes in the first line of verse 14. Due to killing, one is born with a short lifespan. So, for example, if we have killed in the past, and if that does not lead to the ripening result of, say, a rebirth in the lower realms, then one can experience that in terms of the result being a result that accords with the cause. So there are two different types of that. There is in the sense of when one has killed, that other person that one killed experienced some kind of suffering. So to experience a shorter lifespan, or to experience violence like that, a violent death oneself, would be a result that accords with the cause in the sense of the experience that one created for the other party. We could also have a result that accords with the cause in terms of the actor that acted before. So if we are used to killing, we have that kind of propensity to that. If you have then in a future life that desire to kill again and again, one could say that that's a result that accords with the cause in the sense of the kind of habits that one had prior. So, for example, in the case of killing, even if one is to be born as a human, it doesn't result in a ripening result in the lower realms. There can be that result that accords with the cause, leading to a shorter lifespan.
Oh yeah, this one. Oh, like one and the young truth. Yeah, lava to the north.
Just getting to the right spot here.
Oh, love. Yeah, don't do so. Yeah. Oh, don't do the torture. Dimare. Teacher, oh, don't do it. Oh, yeah, did this was cursor. That on that day cursor. Lam tanda talia. Give chutu share what in Doctor de la Shuna. And then Drebu did and Namin Drebu. Nyawaida Tanduta. Kutunjin Drebuda. Shiba Kutun Tetu Drebuti Yungri Shagdwa. Oh, yeah, then did she. So some jet. Oh, Gypsy did it. Serba in the Chetong Justin this one. Number 7, never mind, say this, Seba Digi, 남의 진대부터 냐와이다 냐와리 깨다 쇼셔라 전에 그 진대부터 가려운 거래서는 서바이네 세통도 밀리 깨버이나 소소 세통도 샤그래서 아니 남발서 세두상 고 차와체는 세고라 고 강에 되고라 차와체부터 소소 밀리 깨버이나 소부되고 매와 나 저쪽으로 붙이던데 샤그래서 거라 남발 세가 네바 망서 소볼에 네바 망보다 현다가 네바 쟁게 망보용 그래서 꾸와이네 네 롱셰 본서 꾸마 꾸야 되게 그전기 대부도 시와다 남이 대부도 시험고체 네 진짜라 꾸와이네 롱셰 본서 밀리 깨베나 고 미껴볼 시키거라 미자라 꾸는 버저데 여버데 매버서셔라 대교단 템버시 버저데 냐원하시 다 잘라 맹게라 차르고 지지를 라 껴버쳐거라 롱셰 폰버쳐거라 다 된다 아니 저집에다 소주가 마시면 로임 되시거라 저집에서는 로임 제바데 소소 충만이나다 소소 막바이나다 부도 보모 가리나 어디 현다 다도 소소 메가서 된데 당점도 륜제제네 소소 장발이야 와 매버쳐요래 다다제스 야 디버지 질람나
So here, then getting to, and we are on then verse 14. We can have from these kinds of negative actions, again, engaging in the opposites of those 16 dharmas, then lead to results. They can be ripening results that are not explained here, but killing and so forth will lead to a ripening result of a rebirth in the lower realms. But there's also the kind of result that accords with the cause. So due to killing, one is born with a short lifespan. Again, when you have created that experience in others, it's kind of that you then come to have to that same experience. And so too, due to violence, one encounters much torment. When you are violent with others, when you create harm and suffering for them, the result that accords with the cause is to experience much difficulty and suffering, torment for oneself. And then due to stealing, one becomes impoverished. So again, we don't need to explain that these can lead to ripening results that are in the lower realms. But even if one is born in a good rebirth and has engaged in these actions, you can experience the results that accord with the cause. If you destroy the wealth of others, if you steal and take that and put them in a place of poverty, then poverty is what you are going to experience as a result of that. And then the last line reads, due to adultery, one has enemies. When you engage in that kind of behavior that creates dissension between others, one, as a result, will in the future have enemies.
Oh yeah. 다 전도 마에서도 전시해야 되겠어라. 전도 전마 되게 아니 가령 그래서는 소소라 고아 단계만 뭐 단계만 보는 거라. 뭐야 뭐 말이 지지리 밀리야 교수 시장 고고 단서 소소라 단계만 보는 거라. 네 전도 마에 꾸라 단계만 보는 거래. 참아예네 쉐다제 밀리야 참아 제시를 쪽 되게 정말 소소 밀리게나 소소 중계만 보는 거라. 참아예네 쉐다 소소 가본 이부터다 가가지 미기 두신장게 마부제 초조하냐 이런 거라. 아니 직접 얘기 미니어처 직접을 나야 돼 소소 밀리게나야 계제 매년 버셔지 선배기 우매게 송게 계제 마부터요라. 밀리 직접을 나는 선배기 버셔셔라 뒤에 노하주들 라래야 진짜 남게 마부 용거라. 미니어처 계제 매년 마부터요라. 마드와의 책매서 저 참아 지도 atel리라 다 단담에 치셔 계셔야 되라. 차단 이런 차단다 다 되셔야 돼. 어디 가려운 그래서나 만들어서 되시거나 만들어와의 책매서 소소 계절을 차상게 시다 용마다. 미가시 가르셔네 이치 지금도 차상게 용거 말 어디 용거 되시거나. 야 티버트 줄라나.
So then turning to verse 15, by lying, one becomes reviled. So the results that accord with the cause of lying are that in the future you will have those who are detractors, those who criticize and revile you. So that is the result of lying. And then through speaking divisively, one loses friends. When you speak in ways that cause divisions among others, cause them schisms, then as a result of that in the future, you are more likely to be separated from your friends, to experience that kind of division in your own life. And then through speaking harshly, one hears unpleasant noises. When you create unhappiness for others through the way that you speak to them, through harsh words and so forth, then as a result of that, you are going to hear things that are very unpleasant. That is going to be the result that accords with the cause. Again, these can lead to a ripening result that is in something else. But even if one is to be born as a human, these are the kinds of results that one will have to experience. And then finally, in the last line, it says, from engaging in idle gossip, one's words will be disregarded. So when we say just sort of this and that, we say whatever, don't have any regard for it out of attachment, out of an affliction or not. This kind of idle speech, idle gossip leads to, in the future, not being believed, being disregarded. We can see that there are those who nobody has confidence in, nobody really believes, and that is the result, again, of idle gossip.
Oh yeah. 다 납심 세대로도 납심 내세 로타 얘기 숨디게 되비세도
Mhm.
납심 일에 라완 좀세 미팅 안에 중나 삼고 라와 잡체 티체데 아니 소소리아 이 얘기 삼로 라와 여바 마보치 라와 매버 차그레서 라와 체데 마보치 라와 매번 좀 줘야 된대 요거래서 규통이 되부터다 내심 지바친 거지. 내심 제야 되게 소소 펴줘들이야 내배 삼로 코치 되되 마음바다 소소리야 안에 지 신나름 지바치베 진짜 마음부 연구돼서 그래. 선반비 조성 거다. 내심 지바친 거지. 신나 제고베 진짜 마음부 연구돼서. 로버타에 당에 다 로다 되고 마음바나 고 따왕에 봐. 이게 밀리케네 따왕에 봐도 진짜 진공게 진짜 차도래서. 야 되지라.
So then we turn to those of mind. So in verse 16, covetousness destroys one's desired objects. Malice is said to bestow fear. Wrong view leads to evil world views. So covetousness, when we have lots of hopes, we want many things, we're sort of craving for the objects that others have. The result of that is the destruction of our own hopes, that our hopes will be dashed in the future. The things that we want and desire, we won't be able to have. And then the result of maliciousness, of that thought to harm others, is really being overwhelmed with fear, having fear all of the time. And then wrong view leads to evil world view. When we have engaged or sort of habituated ourselves to these wrong views, again, these are the results that accord with the cause. We are more likely to hold those kinds of bad views again in the future.
야, 다 되다. 청통외에 로 주디서도 청통한테 로 주네. 마음바 밀리기에나 심드네. 노중에 주중에 심바 메테버 창게인데 지고하다. 규통진 잡으더다. 신들레고 류심 라마메 버지고라 청통에다 라신. 류다 심든 남준님 김멤버저 소함메다 쇼네 닉데 가시 김나시 소고하라. 어디인데 가시래. 청통하게 로추네 선배템부 매게 로아 네 선배 녀석부터 지금 진짜 샤이야 그래 아니 짐바마다한테 의부차그라 짐바다나 센데 밀펜도를 주변에 텐데부터 마음발 소소레 펜도 생겨 거라고 짐바마다는 소소 의부차그래서 난주테나 페이지나 연구도 와 가르쳐래 사배 노남 샤는 드라잉에 시간 참에 사배 노데 샤에 스틸레 뱅나를 주네 겨 치마야래 요레세 짐바다를 소와토와 신달티 로버치 톰나 마음발에 텐트부들네 요레세거라 뭐티게 저래시래 야네 짐바마다 의원이세 어디지람나 지도와
So then, consuming intoxicants leads or brings mental confusion. Again, they're going through these 16 dharmas. And when one is in the habit of consuming intoxicants, that leads to a lack of clarity. When one has come into the habit of that, I mean, you can fall into a kind of addiction in this life, but it will lead to really being separated from that kind of mental clarity, lacking that even more in the future. So that is the result of consuming intoxicants. And then through not giving gifts, one is poor. So again, this is referring to that kind of respectful generosity. If one doesn't engage in generosity, then this is something that will lead to impoverishment in the future. It's said that the best way, I mean, usually when we accumulate wealth such that we can use it again, like we put it in a bank. But really, engaging in generosity is like putting money in the bank, and that we are able to experience the results of that in the future.
Oh, yeah. So, what to do? Lots of data.
Mm,
So, taking Pinto Swanka, so that Kimber Yenako, that is him, which do Sarah. What so there? Liberties. Lots of chat, mission, so some military, so go down the Mambo and go down the liberties. And can't buy any ringing. I get some butchana. My own ball so misery. I get so ringing, but Mabuchi said today. Me that Jagadwa and Rick Mabuchi Yora. Rick Mabut and the Miri, Tunjuches and the Kigora. So I get a chamber in some milma, Mabuchi Samtangiora. The Chemanti and David and Sosoya, Misu Mabu, the Session Chandra. Logbar songa lu ba te se kengba yene ringe ni se ring ma bu che ten de che ga re chado ge ne si chun ni mi shen da le chado che be na so so si ji chun ju cha ga ra mi shen da te chen bo de do ting san be den du se ra lo chon chen ge de na den du ma bu che do chen mo chen ge na den du yo ra pen jo chong ba na den du yo ra den du se de ko ya bu ra de me do Pajodin Dan ko yabu machuna samya nyagadwa. Pile chesu iran de yabu yore. Ngazi pejana chesu iran sido. Yaga ji chungdu na kangal kawa kum gora. Simjen tamjer ko su ina chi yaga ji chungdu na tele chungdu kawa kum gora. Kawa chami sido. Tunge mewe tawa da mendra achu chis ko lobchong thola kange mewe yabu yora. Ni te yabu de sam ku yora. 그 제수 일하지 앞에 야구를 그 롭좀 야구 치도 아 근데 제통의 야구도 와서 그걸 뺐다는 야구 치고도 삼네 그 야구 치 서서 야구 치 디심슈 빼는 야구래도 마돈 된두체에서는 퍼져도 야구 맞추는 삼제 자도치 뚜르도라 서서 롭좀 제를 내가 치라 딱바리 디삼로 코데네 제 롭좀 야구 매용하다 님도 전부 매용을 내가 치라 어때데 제수 일한 전에 야구도 와 퍼져도 먼저 야구지 먼저 내가 야구 치도 농바 있는데 가리나 변조 야구 치다래서 간데 전 정도 먼저 되네시 제통의 야구도 와 삼다니 되도 먼저 빼대네 빼 야구도 삼 디젠 소소 야제 카르타네 탄데라 탄 덴도서 먼저 된다 먼저 면도 카르타 먼저 요데 차도제네야 텔레토르도 냐가도 와 어디도 가서다 야 인데서
mm,
차도 되네 시촌이 시지 춘중 차별을 써서 네가 춘중 차별을 미 지도 나려 근데 가른도스나 토에르와 토에도 공도 써야 되겠지나 남이 이제부터 녀이다 되지와 디탄다 규정이 되시고라 토아에네 도면 받기 거라 공도 사부치도 자 담도 소소 미도 소소 제세라 미디 동을 땅이 조마로 공도 마부세나 동대 만다라 제부 지지슈지라 이제 마음바라 코티네시 차겨라 미도 소소 제세 담범에 버리 비전에 이거 괜찮시다다 뱀메다지니 괜찮시다다 되나 공도 세서는 미적은 제가 따면 뭐 괜찮다 야고 통마를 파 동을 땅이 조마래 어디네시시거라 가서 토아이네 거기서 캥바이네 텐디소
mm,
초에 동행 받기 그래서라 미도에서 미도 수수지 코로나 요르와 미도 수수지 담바 멤버티스 Se dele tende chagora ti ke mao bale ko tende che kongere se mizutana ya ho tondon ya bo ma kanza du samsara chi tende yong do ara shin ga tende o ane kare si chunye cha toyen dongye che kebar mede ba nye se kebar zole to ma te se na ne lumbu cha so so sing marwa mi shenge dele keje ti to de ma shin ba kanga keje ti jenani ya ya re du Koshengi na nga tiku me samshine pamde chene ni sozo shing marwa. Ya tipa de chiguna.
So here then continuing in again verse 17 now, wrong livelihood results in getting tricked. So again, we have talked about what wrong livelihood is, both for householders as well as those who are ordained. And because that involves tricking others, deceiving them, then that results in oneself being tricked, being taken advantage of by others. And these are all descriptions of results that accord with the cause. So then we turn to arrogance. When we are arrogant, we see ourselves as being like above all others. We sort of look down upon them as being in a low sort of position. And so when we look at others as lowly, we sort of look down upon them. The result of that kind of arrogance is for ourselves to take such a station in the future, wherein we will be looked down upon by others. We will be born here in a kind of bad lineage is the way that it says it, but basically in a position where others will be likely to look down upon us. And then we have jealousy brings about unattractive appearance. And this is really important. Jealousy can be like really pernicious. We have this sort of, particularly in all facets of our society, but even in education and in play and in various things, a lot of competitiveness. And competitiveness is really a negative kind of a thing. It's something that leads us to, it's intertwined with jealousy. And it really is a sense of like feeling, wanting to defeat others, to win above them. And so rather than feeling good or rejoicing in the good qualities of others, one wants to beat them, one wants to do better. So really, when it comes to this, we should instead rejoice in others' success, in the good that they have, rather than seeing it as being like, well, how come I couldn't get that, or how come I don't have that? Instead, we should feel joy. I mean, we talk about generating immeasurable joy, wherein we want others to have happiness and not be separated from happiness. And so we should look upon the success of others, whether that is in education or in business or whatever it might be, and really feel like, oh, that's so great, that's so wonderful. Look at how they were able to do that. May I also be able to do that? Rather than feeling a sort of competitiveness, we should enhance our own inspiration. We should use them as like an example of like, oh, that's how I would like to be as well, and really feel that joy, rather than like jealousy. When we feel jealousy, we are harming ourselves and others. And it really, as it explains here, the ripening result of that is having this kind of unattractive appearance. We are unattractive to others. And then the result of anger, from anger comes a bad complexion. So when we are angry, often when we get angry, our face sort of gets contorted. It's like other people don't even want to look at you when you're angry. It's something that is a very unpleasant kind of thing to witness. Like you could have somebody who is made up really beautifully, all of these jewels and very attractive things, but if the person wearing all of that gets angry, and no one thinks they look beautiful, no one thinks they look nice, they don't even want to look at them. And so anger leads to us having that kind of like bad complexion where people don't want to look at us. And then, and stupidity, since one will not question the wise. So when we don't, in a context where we don't know something, turn to someone who might, and ask questions in order to develop our own knowledge, the result of that is stupidity, that we won't know anything.
Oh yeah, Miki legend Butelia, Kivele Chutu Yarba, Tin Docho, Miki Letulia, 제부 되게 규통진 제부세 때마다 요 말베스나 마르다 남이진 제부대 냐와이다 돈들 깨다 제부 두시대다 냐와이다 돈들 깨야되레스거라 뒤에서로 규통진 제부 대삼도 세바이나스나 말에세 미니라는 제부 대세 kunji dambu ngendun ro se, ro, tene tesamji seba ma re se, mikiwe le di kunji debu dambu te, namiji debu dambu te, nyawa yida tandul kiya te re se. Ni mili kiba yina ya ngama le de cheba ke, teta kyutumbi debu te, so che la kawa la soba tang, susu longchu yabu me yonga la soba, sobu tebu me takwa risi na tengi sonda, tende mi se ne, neba mabu cheba te debu yungo ra. Debu tso de dushu te te ko nami chi debu te ra. De mili ke ne yonga te te ta chanda wa. Pacho de le mi ten le kare nyao re. So so kare che wera kumshi liya ja dengi ra. Sonde kuma ina kuma kuyel kabura cha dugu wa ra. O te si wa ra. Ya te si la na. Ta chonda de tanda sheya de kanga. Ngode kyu chutu yu wa. Tin doksho ke mi ke wa te sawa ina. Ane debu te te yu wa re se te sheya yu wa ra. 독초 근데 추추긴 독초 미케 와트서 제베는 데부티티 가서 규통지 데부티티 요레스 남미지 데부티티 요레스 어디시아다 야 되지라나
So here, then it continues in this second half of verse 18, where it says, these are the effects when one is reborn as a human, but prior to all of them is a bad rebirth. So here one might think this has been describing the kind of results that accord with the cause, and one might think, well, is it just those results that accord with the cause that might come about? Well, no, it's prior to all of that is a bad rebirth. So here, as a result, we can have the ripening result of being born in those lower realms, or we can have these kinds of results that accord with the cause. When, for example, one engages in killing or violence, harm toward others, and we are creating those kinds of situations of difficulty, suffering, torment for others, then we are going to, as a result of that, experience something that is similar to that cause, similar to the experience that we gave for another. So the 16 causes for higher rebirth that have just been described, that one is to engage in, then this is looking at what are the opposites. If you engage in the opposites of those, going on these wrong paths, then what are the results that will come about? There's obviously the ripening result of a lower rebirth, but there are also these kinds of results that could be experienced in a human rebirth that are results that accord with the cause.
오야 다던다디 미게와 ngode 추추루기 미테초 그와 슈베나 네 규통진 데부디디 그레스 남이진 데부들라 야와이다 돈도성 키야테 그레스 티샤사라 다데 데카돌이야 그나 람리 쳔모데 로나 야부요라 람리 쳔메 카돌 티사모페 게시 야부요라 디는 데바나레 우단 람리 쳔모로 아시고다 그나 소초번데지나 시 삼바 조라 터두스 시셰그라 시고네 시스드코 세야이나 거리나 딜시고라 시스 삼바스드 삼로타에 컨데체네 세고라 시티라 시 삼바 조라스 인탑시 세단 가르치그라 티자그라 메데자라가 냥그르 가르치네 티시고라 시 삼바 조라 터두데 코피게 세야데네 시비치고요라 오텐데 시고네 셰그라 소주번데제나 고 시디 심전인바 치고가라 심전인바 바로 보이바 소소마인게 치고라 소소 심전 소소소소야요라 디티나르 소치베단 두고 말해 시 심전인바 라레 셴베 서바보 라레 셴베 심전인바 지고라 시시라 삼바들 솜셰기도 시 삼바들 솜셰기라 두시스도 고 가리나 다시세고 삼바이나 제다 텔은 두시베 치고가라 심전은 두신가 심전 세기 삼네 그 사라져 도도진 두삼면데 잡대체는 미세베 누구 말와 그 심전은 두시베 치고라 디나네 심전도 두시베 소된도 두시베 치고라 두시세 아니 가서라 두시세 네 근루레 근루스도 Min didan di segi sam neba chi kuyora. Chita misu chu yuna segi sam na ko keba yo marwa. Ko mi shenda chi sego sam norne shenda chi sebe na tikpa de yore de tikpa so chibe tikpa chasan de yungo mar ko nor marwa. Aka drima sun sam tate nge nor rwa ko se ko sidi ma chun rwa. Sa ko samba che ane kulung de su segi na tin seba chi kora. Ni nyomo sigira. Nyomo sido ko se de karetunda sevre. Kasha shala chakbe wangi chi karsira. Ko longje de tendele chakbe wangi segi yona. Ane dosha kune lan segora. Kasha kondro sen ko nga yabu chema so kondro kune lan semne kondro segora. Kasha yan timu ko chi ko segore choda chola tachengere samsara tende chi chevina samlo no ne se asiwara. Timu sigira. Mishibe mombe wangi shayata. Wata te nyamo tole dhamma da yungo wara. Te dushi de karsora. Kuno de michik sago sam shanda se norso na dhiyo mara. Teda terbe manora chikora. Samba dila sumda shekdwa. Shibe samlo tancho tela. Shi samba ni chora te chane ne shegi nada. Mili nga ne shegi nada. Nga gyamne shegi nada. Tabshi mente ne shegi nada. Karishana choan dhamma da yungo wara. Tartu de pacho de shiwa shi koguyara. Sego sam mere chichane chare nene mashina yani tikpa chazan yung maro ko mashisa tegora. O tende che shida samba chowa tartu sero. Tende re chane pe kesh keba yora. Ti lamdi chamu tuzna tatuna ti pe sebo yabu chavira. O ti shoya.
So here, what is being described again is that if you do those 16 dharmas that lead to higher rebirth, then you get such a result. But what are the results then, particularly those results that accord with the cause of engaging in those 16 opposites? So here, when it comes to the way in which one engages in these actions and the kind of results that come about, I think it would be good to read in Jela Tsongkhapa's great stages of the path. Really, this presents an extensive explanation of karma, looking at the kind of the basis of that, the sort of preparation for it, the actual action itself, the conclusion of the action. So when we have something like killing, we have like, well, the basis, who is the object of that action? It has to be a sentient being. And in this context, it actually needs to be another sentient being other than yourself. Although we can have the killing of oneself, for the non-virtue of killing, it needs to be another sentient being other than oneself. And then there's the sort of thought. Now, the thought, again, encompasses the intention that one has, as well as the kind of discernment of the object and the affliction that might be involved. Then there's the sort of like actual carrying out of the action. So whatever methods one might use, there's the engagement with the action, and then finally the completion. So here, again, when it comes to the sort of basis for an action, in the context of killing, that needs to be another sentient being. And we also need to, when it comes to the sort of thought, the intention, we need to identify properly the object. We need to have the proper kind of discernment. So if we say, like, think, oh, I'm going to kill this person, but we actually like shoot a gun at something that's just a stack of, flour or something like, is not actually a person. We had the intention, right? But our discernment was mistaken. Or if we think, oh, I'm going to go and kill this guy, but we accidentally kill a different guy, then we might think like, oops, I did the wrong thing. So although you engage in the act of killing and you accumulate the negative karma of killing, there's a difference in terms of the intention or the thought because of that kind of mistaken discernment. You didn't actually pick the right person that you were trying to kill. So these add to the kind of complexity of the way that we understand karma. So again, we can have the kind of the discernment of the object. It needs to be a basis that is another sentient being. And then there's the sort of intention. Well, what is the affliction, say, that's motivating one to kill? We could kill out of attachment, out of wanting something from the victim, or we like are trying to steal something from them. We could kill out of hatred. We could kill out of ignorance. There are sort of many different afflictions that could motivate us to engage in this action. And this is, again, something where it needs to be unmistaken. To could get the complete kind of karma, we need to have identified the proper basis. We're motivated by whatever affliction it might be, and then we carry out the actual action. In the case of killing, maybe we're shooting somebody or stabbing somebody or poisoning them or whatever it might be. That is the actual action, and it only is completed then with the ending of that life. So the kind of description that Je Lama Tsongkhapa provides regarding karma in his great stages of the path is something that I think would be very beneficial to read, to understand the nuances and the various dimensions of karma.
Oh yeah. 당한 저 대시가 기회를 제부세. 단다 추추두게 미드셔되게 제부대 셔라. 다 기회를 추추두게 기회를 제부대 텔렌 독바죠. 그래서 다기 미팅바 미기회를 제부대다 독셔대. 냐이다 길라서 맞을 하다 밀어서 버틴데 제시라. 근데 체르만라 소바다 어디 소바 개보 용해라 소바 소교발라 소버틴데 제부 용 차야 용구라. 대시가 개와시자 대다께서도 미기 시자 대다게 남이 잡아 가이바 미기와 주두게 남이 넘버 멤버다 교통진 대부 단다 셰바 가이바 잡아 가이바 대시거라 오늘 개와라 베네가세 개와단에 탐자라 대부는 도우티 조서 다 개와 주두게 개와들야 대는 대부 단다 미기와라 셰베 대부들 도우데 정도스 남이진 대부 개와 또 치슈데 셰나 로 주두나네 소교발라 소바카리나 아니 살레키라 살레 개와를 버리지만 보여라 추주베 때 라이네라 추주베만 보여라도 추주세 미장자마로 근데 개와를 침부사나 라이나네 개와 상부튼데 추주세트도 시래 디나네니 밀레 개네 근데 기그레시 와라 남이지 되버들이야 미키 세자 대다게 남이 잡아 가인바 개와단에 탐자라 제부 걔는 도데 줘서 어디데 그나 소주 방에 생일이나라 메즈네 삼르다 추추루디 티체베나 아니 라다 밀케야다 제 제부들 마오발이야 네가서 소소 소부 대보용하다 체름 보용하라 소바 어때서 간가 괜히 용기로 와 계단 도데 그래서 어디 시야나야
So then we turn to, again, we have these 16 dharmas that lead to higher rebirth, and then the opposites of those. We've sort of gone through what are the, not just the ripening results or the sort of fruitional results of those, but also, again, the fruitional or the ripening result will be the most powerful kind of result in the rebirth that one takes. But the opposites of those 16 virtuous actions, what are the kind of results that come from that? So here it says, and this is beginning in verse 19, such are widely known as the fruitional results of these actions that are called the non-virtues. So those are the fruitional results that come about from those negative actions. For all of the virtuous actions, there are the opposite effects. So here, when it comes to those positive actions, the results are the opposite. So the ripening, the fruitional result would be birth as a human or a god. And there are many different types of gods, some of which really do have the opportunity to practice the Dharma, have the potential for doing various good, positive actions. So the fruitional results then of things like giving protection from fear, being generous, avoiding killing, and so forth, will be to have those kinds of good fruitional results, as well as results that accord with the action, having the kind of habits of doing those things. So if on a daily basis we have a thought, we make this kind of pledge, like I am not going to engage in killing, I'm not going to engage in stealing, and so forth, the kind of results that will come from that, for example, abandoning killing, taking life, leads to our having a long life with good health and so forth. These are the kinds of ripening, results that accord with the cause that can come from those kinds of virtuous actions.
Oh yeah, 단데 개맥이 준대 소소시에부터 시작도 개와다 미개와게 주체는 내부 갈거리는 그래서 소소시에도 가서 차다 시다 띠무 메서 아 차다 시다 띠무 당서 도차 시다 띠무 숨부터게 와라 그나 소체바를 지내 소미 보조 가서 민대전티 롱줄을 차는 세계다 심전되지는 샤를 차는 세계다 티가르는 티소라 차다는 공두체 띠무체 라미시베 몸보체 어저게 대숨데 깨벨에데 미겨와레스 거라 네 마샤 가스라 마샤 가시 다들 계절 자오라 시담메베케자 띠무메베케자 네 참 가서 네 참메베케자 시스파 개와들 샤라 마샤 시다 띠무메 되게 레데 교회에서 근데 된다 미케 꾸네란데 중에 레도 강가되네 미케와레 교회 삼로 꾸네란데 중에 레도 강가 네 교회에서 어디서도 그 다반들이 도자시다 때문에 되게 벌레니 야 딜람데도 야
So then we turn to the kind of explanation of the individual causes and results of virtue and non-virtue. So here it reads then in verse 20, beginning with the non-virtuous. Attachment, anger, and confusion, and the karma that arises from them are non-virtuous. So again, out of attachment, say to the possessions of someone else, we might kill them, or out of attachment to their flesh or their fur, we kill animals. One might kill out of ignorance. So the attachment, anger, and confusion, and whatever are the actions motivated by them, should be known as non-virtuous. And the opposite, non-attachment, non-anger, non-confusion, and the karmas that arise from them are virtuous. So when we act in a way that is without any kind of attachment, without hatred, without ignorance, those kinds of actions are virtuous.
야, 다 미케와레 동에 그 대신에도 탐제도 쓰도 미케벨레 사발라 때네 냐와이다 텐루다 밀레 사바카레 동에 가리네 테 상마 탐제데 미케벨레 근데 부레서 거라 미케왈레 동에 그 냐와이다 텐루 이네다 밀레 이네다 동에 마모요다 할레네 동에 거라 콜리케 사주 어디 간가데 미케벨레 근데 부레서 미케왈레 동에 그세 대신에도 탐제도서 밑에는 개와고한테 전에 내선 숨을 써봤다 좀 미개월 미개월한테 끼기를 거라 내선 숨을 맞게나 하다 밀 깨비나야 텔레 동행 중에 교도소 강에 봤더니 미개월에 이제 부르서 거라 지난 개월에도 그 개월에 이제 부이나야 텔레 동행 중에도 강가도 미개월에 이제 부르대어라 미개월에 동행 그 좋아도 거에 동행 상마탐제도 미개월한테 좋아했습니다. 대신 년도 탐제도서 년도 겨울에 서버터서 남이 진대부터라 년도 겨울에 서버터서 간거데 년도 탐제와 내와이다 전도 좀 그랬어. 근데 결에 된도 탐 계획을 때네 된도 라다미 겨와다 근데 돈도를 지네 고 삼살 때와도부터 요에 요라 그래서 간거데 나를 겨와서 근데 부르서라 근데 사와를 집에 가로 룽 잠무시 겨와 있는데 참는데 개velejin de buisira 미케와라 니카르세서 kelay tenro tamcheta kyawa kondo tewala kire tanda mikiwale tonge sama tamcheta nge songi kyawa yungure se kyawa drupala tenne kyawa tamcheta ane lada mila soba kyawa sambulan kire se o di shekdwa ya.
So then and this is verse 21, from non-virtue comes all suffering, likewise all negative rebirth. From virtue comes all positive rebirths and the happiness within all births. So here then one can have, I mean, this is describing the kind of results that one gets from such actions. From non-virtue comes all of our sufferings. So this could be the sufferings that we experience as a birth in the lower realms, a hell being, hungry ghost, or an animal, or it could be the kinds of sufferings that we experience even on a good rebirth, the kind of sufferings that one experiences as a human, even as a god. There are certain sufferings that one experiences. So that kind of ripening, the fruitional result may be one in which we have a good rebirth, but we can still trace the sufferings that we experience to having come from non-virtue. And then when it comes to even if the fruitional result, so when we can have a situation, all virtue is where all of our happiness comes from, and those sorts of happiness within all births. So it's said that even if we are now, I don't know about the hell realms or hungry ghosts, but even when one takes, so the fruitional result of virtue would be a rebirth as a human or a god, and it's occasionally the case that animals can experience sort of happiness. So like a cool breeze when one is experiencing extreme heat. All of those positive kind of happy experiences that one has are said to be the result of virtue that one has done in the past.
뭐야 단대기 지대로 냠소 랑베 추이데 shekdwa chuchu ta tipa chuchu ta chera ta le te ta nyamle khande shegurasena pangla khande shegurasena pangya ta lang nyamso lang chat kar shegurasena o ani kara yida luda nga gile wa lunga yesum kiswa yida luda nga gile neki wale ndo chashes lunga yesum jikone shanla tsawa ga chenge gi rus ki ba chama tamjete do gure sura pangja de pang gure sura ane kela ta don ju chawa kewa chudu de la tu ta do ne niri mechina ya ju gure sura ane shende namba ni su che so oda nyamso langcha da dorja ham mekewa kewa shima penja la da me lu kebar cha chudu be ten kebar cha thoko go yo na o deni de mekewa chudu de pang gure se ni kewa chudu de nyamso lang gure niri mechina o te ko kar so ra 아주 최최 소소 미르지 거라 타체지 거라 교체만 해봐도 하다 미고 와치도 해봐도 와치기 디면은 애솔 깨는 백강에 삼산지 삼동원에 타고 거라 어떻게 연애단 애솔 깨지 교대가 돼 파파 하다 밀 깨지 교대가 돼 냠솔라 삼산지 거라 칠단들에게 맨안에 다서 녀진여 대샤들어 마음바시니 교체만 해버리 지요나로 kewa chima kanga liya tuyun duwa sopo duwa sopo de kona tuyu chen do shakre zoya siyo ma re tuyu chan do re sa chan do re to chan do re dhamenda chan do re tuyen de kona namga ne nga zo dhamenda chaya duwa timbare ji ko che de namgal kage yo ma re tuyen tu chi so ne she de to jab sun ya chokpo shudin de ma yo ya duwa to sun de chokpo shudin de yo ya duwa tinde chokpo ji ge yo ma ro Today, Corazon to the temporary language, the son is troubleshoot mega mayona, Tonashima, troubleshoot in the Mapayora. Business today, Ganga Judo, I'm in the Chayadua. Not under me, the sober the some sort of Torah Chagadua made sober. Torah Chadu today, Yora. Or Tiendico, today, Corazon, Guru and Rota Matachi Rota Yora. Tina sing around the loot and some yigana some day, san Dharma Drachil, ten Chekoya, Seshiri, Kurachin Rodeo. Joya Dona Sobo, Jodu, any pen Jodura. There was a message de la coverage, Tamaka children, the members of the association. Some young Jedi, Sorachi, Madokata, Melton Sayado, message deal Tambo Pe Kata, Pet Tumbushida Yuna, Chimandi Namsana Kata, Messere, the head to the Sayado. So called cars of the same day, Kora, Jurashibs and Dragora, Lula Tendegora, Lula Tendi, Luta, Davacha, do not Tarsi, and Kora Konachin Dosagora. Tinder Coca soda. Joshima here said to Santi, Jutan Kengi on the Yongora, Namachena. Drebu Karina, Kujingo on the Yongora. The Judy and Drebu the Yongora, Judy man and Drebu Yomara, Roshima Zeke Yomara. For tea in the car soda. Joshima Nibato Lata me, should be Tensia, Tama, Yason Dromogasha, Yaya, dress, Chego, some Kuda. Teaching Judy to Nachiendoa. Take on the Kyo Toma Mebana Sasha, but Tipa Mabuyorwa. This was some Tamjil Shakache. No, Sendiliani, Yirina Mewacha, Tichena. Tikumshi de Jani Shigalamolaki, something on the shit over there. Tichena Lada Milke, the Kota Shadura. Just so lava you were a redwa, Tihakoda, Tangi Dagan going this, Kiran Lagvalio, Dasungura. Teaching a so I kept to a Yichichen, Yirin Messina Sena. Nikevala Komdara Chuna, Nishigalama Kivesam Jigana Shidura. Teach the Kachama Yaway, Susula Banado, what is shiny this? Yeah, mounted.
So here then it says the Dharma of upper rebirth is considered to be twofold. One should not engage in non-virtue through mind, body, or speech, but one should always engage in virtue through those three. So really, there are two things that are mainly to be done in terms of this Dharma. There are those things that we are to abandon with our body, speech, and mind, and those things that we are to engage in, to positively do with our body, speech, and mind. So one should avoid those kinds of harmful actions, all forms of harm to others through body, speech, and mind, and try to practice those things which are virtuous, which are beneficial to others. And so here it says, as this says in verse 22, that really on a daily basis in our life, I mean, we need to be thinking about the kind of reason, the sort of objective that we have in listening to the Dharma. We need to really think about this and really consider why it is that we are doing this. If we don't have a sense of like the importance of what we are doing in terms of being able to secure a future rebirth as a human or a god, then really we're just sort of like sitting here listening as if it were like entertainment or something, but the benefit is quite limited to that. And so here, when we think about like what our objective is, why are we practicing the Dharma? What is it that we are doing this for? At the very least, we should be thinking about gaining a good rebirth in the future, having the kind of conditions to be able to continue this practice. But when we think about like the form that we have right now, it is something that is continuously changing. I mean, our mind is changing moment to moment, and so too is our body. And I mean, when we die, the sort of atoms in our body aren't going to just disintegrate and become non-existent, but they will carry on in various continua, in various different sort of forms throughout the world. So we can see that out of kind of there's a constant stream of flow and change. And when we look at the kind of situation that we are in, our body as well as our mind is really constantly changing. We can see that our body or our mind is dependent upon the kind of conditions in the body. If something changes, we can lose certain faculties and abilities, the ability to speak or to do, and so forth. And so when we look at the kind of situation that we are in, we should recognize that really we have the ability in our hands right now. We are going to, this life, we have to pass beyond, and we are going to take a future rebirth. And so if we really have a sense of that, if we really have a felt conviction about the fact that we have to take a rebirth in the future, then we have a real sense of we need to avoid those kinds of actions that lead to such a rebirth, knowing for certain that things are causal, that results come about from the proper sort of causes. So if we want to avoid such a negative rebirth, then we need to avoid the kind of causes. We need to, in turn, generate the causes that will lead to a good rebirth. And we can recognize that we have done many negativities in the past. And so confessing and trying to avoid or trying to purify those kinds of negativities, we can see that we really have the power in our hands to determine where we will go in the future by creating these kinds of habits where we habituate ourselves on a daily basis, thinking I'm not going to engage in non-virtues, I'm going to engage in virtues, I'm going to try to purify those kinds of negativities that I have accumulated in the past. When we have created those sorts of habits in our daily lives, then we can be confident that we will die with a virtuous kind of a mind. Again, the Buddha has always said that we are our own protectors and we are our own masters. It is in dependence upon our own actions that our future will be determined. So we need to have confidence that we have the ability to protect ourselves through our own actions, and that really comes through a kind of conviction in cause and result.
Oh, yeah, that is also. Oh.
So we will stop there for today as we are out of time.
Geshe, thank you for your immeasurable kindness in teaching this morning. And Katrina, thank you for your beautiful translation. We'll do some dedications, and we hope to see everyone again next week at 9 Pacific time.
May the spiritual teachers who lead me on the sacred path, and all spiritual friends who practice it, have long life. May I pacify completely all outer and inner hindrances. Grant such inspiration, I pray. May the lives of the venerable spiritual mentors be stable, and their virtuous actions spread in the 10 directions. May the light of Lobsang's teachings dispelling the darkness of the beings in the 3 worlds always increase. Iram Guru Rana Mandalakam Niryatayami. Due to this merit, may we soon attain the awakened state of Guru Buddha, that we may be able to liberate all sentient beings from their sufferings. May the precious Bodhi mind, not yet born, arise and grow. May that born have no decline, but increase forevermore.
Oh, yeah.
Tuktina Gela. Pachinches.
Oh, yeah, good.
Welcome.
Welcome. Yeah.